Now, 2026 is again shaping up to be yet another year where sports dominates our screens, our phones, and for some of us, maybe most of us, our lives. And as any sports fan knows, it's not just the visuals, but it's also the sounds that go into making the experience what it is. So I'm delighted to welcome award-winning re-recording mixer Tom Nursey at Sky Post Production and Angela Gomez, a sound engineer who's worked at the heart of live sports events from Wimbledon to the UEFA Champions League to this session to help us dissect the sound of sport. Tom and Angela, a very warm welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So look, we're heading into another summer, huge summer filled with sport. From an audience perspective, or from an audio perspective, what has changed when it comes to audiences' expectations? Tom, why don't you begin?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that from the post side of things. I think something that we've seen massively change, maybe even more recently in the last kind of couple of years, is just the amount of sport. I think people want more sport, and from the kind of post side of things, they want that sort of that polish, that extra bit of polish on sport. So I think just the amount of sport across a huge range of mediums as well. So all the way from promos, packages, up to documentaries, and we're seeing entire series on sport now. So I think the biggest shift we've seen at Sky Post, working with Sky Sports, is just the amount of content coming in and the amount of content that they want that post polish on.
So they're becoming more discerning about the quality of audio.
I think so. That's what we're seeing. I think they're seeing the real value in that post can bring to that sport content, even if it's fast turnaround. And I think the other thing that we're seeing, which is potentially more of a post landscape wide thing, is dialogue intelligibility. I think that's always the thing that hits the forums. It hits the news sometimes. My mum's always saying, why do I have to keep turning the TV up and down to hear the dialogue? So that's definitely has a place in sport as well, with noisy stadiums, after-match interviews, things like that. So I'd say those two are the things we've seen really.
Angela, what about you?
I think so we're seeing different challenges and different changes in behavior of people and how people view sports. Whilst before it was more traditionally people tuning into the TV, we see more of a move on to streaming content and the quality of it, making sure that it's not a second thought where we have the same quality for what you tune in onto your TV to what you see on your phone, perhaps. Also, we see more of a move into immersive and personalized audio experiences, and I can see some productions moving towards that and making that available for people to create their own experience. I think Premier League Productions did a really interesting experiment. They blended with AI. They basically did this 360 experience from the gantry, one from the left goal, one from the right goal, and then you basically pick all of this and you cater to your own taste. So I've seen more of a move towards this, and the quality for streaming has basically increased as well.
Let's talk a bit about the quality, because you've done a whole range of major live sporting events. What's the most difficult sporting environment to mix audio in live?
Well, there's things that you can control, like acoustics and PA noise and crowd noise. And coming from a live sound perspective, before I did broadcast, I did live sound for music and theatre. That's always a thing that you have to adapt. There's so many different variables that will affect how you can transmit things consistently across different venues, like the shape of the stadium, what materials are they on, etc., etc. If they put extra PA to enhance the punter's experience, we don't usually have that line of communication with the PA person to be able to be like, can you maybe tone it down a little bit? We just have to work with it. So that is super challenging, but that's where it comes like some creativity on maybe sometimes miking up closer certain things, approaching it a little bit differently.
So is it hard to achieve a level of consistency across large scale?
Absolutely, yes. There's so many things that can go wrong. The infrastructure might be a little bit not fantastic sometimes, and you just have to deal with it. Sometimes you just getting to a position where you're going to be able to do the transmission. It's challenging, and let alone keeping it consistently, that's also pretty difficult.
Sports is unscripted, but at its best, it can still feel hugely cinematic. How much is the storytelling driven by sound, Tom?
Yeah, I think in a world of multi-device consumption, if you've got the TV on but you're on your phone as well, I think sound's playing a more important role than ever. I think, and certainly in sport as well. I think from the post perspective, we have a little bit more time. We can sort of step back. We certainly don't have the pressures of the live broadcast environment. We can start to think, how do we take a step back? How do we start to pull this apart and actually shape a storyline through, whether it's a package or a promo, all the way up to a documentary? And there's many ways we can do that through the use of reverbs or sort of bolstering certain moments, whether we absolutely have to lean on the broadcast, what actually happened in the match or the game or whatever it is. But we can choose certain moments and enhance those through sound design or reverbs or whatever it is that we do. So I think storytelling is absolutely vital, even in sport content as well.
And Angela, when it comes to live events?
Well, when it comes to live events, sound is incredibly important for creating and making sure people feel part of the game wherever they are. So it's incredibly important. And the approach we give or we take when we're doing this is very important as well. It's about being intentional and knowing what we want to transmit and having that brief very clear in our heads, to make sure that not just us, but the rest of the team understands what we need to do to make sure that the right thing is transmitted, the right emotion, the crowd, the silence, depending on different sports.
When things do go wrong, and they inevitably do, I mean, some people will say that audio failures are noticed far more quickly than visual failures. Can you tell us what level of kind of contingency planning goes into preventing those or mitigating them?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like in different sports so far in my career, we usually approach it the same. We would have like a fiber and a copper layer as a backup, right? And that's an UPS or whatever power backup you have from the truck onwards. Where I see a little bit of a gap coming from a different industry like live music and live events is at the beginning of the signal, we don't really have that resiliency that much built in as like a seamless switch. For example, in live events or music, we use Spectera or Axient Quadversity, which has been super helpful in some of the shows I've done. I had Axient for the first time in 2019 in one of my shows, and it just removed the guesswork on, is this going to work? Is this frequency going to be clean? Because you don't have time, really. When you do an OB, your antennas are down. You have to pull them up for when you do the hit at halftime. And sometimes it feels a bit of like, okay, I hope this works. And that's where I see that maybe we can be more resilient from end to end, not only by perhaps adapting things from other industries that really works, but also putting in place some UPSs. We have some network switches at commentary that can be vulnerable for this, and you don't want to have a gap on a broadcast if you can avoid it. If it's good enough for live music, I think it's good enough for us.
So what you're saying is that broadcast is actually lagging behind live music events?
We do tend to lag behind. Like, I've only started seeing Dante being deployed on site recently, but this has been around for ages. So it's okay. I understand that different industries move differently for different reasons, budget, I don't know, deployability, whatever it is. But it's how we make this, we deploy these technologies to make sure that we're properly resilient from end to end, because we can.
When it comes to a live sporting environment, I mean, there are so many teams working on their own individual bits to get the broadcast out there. How closely are sound teams working with directors and producers to shape that narrative in real time? Tom?
Yeah, I think in post, I think across post widely, but absolutely in sport as well. The relationship between the mixer and the director is absolutely vital. I think it's kind of one of the key elements of being a re-recording mixer, really. And the benefit in sport of having that really close relationship with the director is that we work across such a wide range of sport, all different types, certainly in Sky Post, and I can't watch that much sport, I can't consume that much sport, I can't know all of that sport in such great detail. So what the directors and the sport producers bring is that really intimate detail of that sport specifically. So, for example, a couple of weeks ago I did it was about a 20-minute feature on cricket in Nepal. And I've never watched a Nepal cricket game before, but it's absolutely going crazy over there. So the director was able to come in and give me a real insight into what it feels like to be in the stadium or a cricket ground for a Nepal cricket game, and they go absolutely mental. So he was able to really guide me and push the crowd a bit more, give it a bit more welly, give it a bit more oomph. So I think it's absolutely vital.
Angela?
Well, I think the director and the producers are the conductors of the whole thing, and we all tend to work at unison. And I feel like on the OB side of it, we are very much a team, like very much of team spirit. Like, you have very few people that don't work as a team. So we're listening, we're actively trying to anticipate what the director might want and make sure that we can translate and push that whatever the director wants. Some productions are more rigid and less spontaneous, and some of them are very spontaneous, and it's just having that ability of, okay, what do I need to have in order to make sure that if we want to do something spontaneous, we can do it.
And in a live environment, I mean, a lot of production workflows are now remote and distributed. How does that affect your communication?
It does affect our communication quite a lot, because it makes it quite layered, like a cake, right? And then, for example, if something breaks, when you're on site, you don't know until somebody, perhaps from here, pass down the message to the person on the truck, and the person on the truck pass it down to us. So that's still pretty clunky at the minute. Also, the communication systems that we still use right now, I think not everybody uses Boleros, which is much clearer communication. We still use Motorola's, which can be challenging if you have your production talkback, your program, your director, your sound team on the same channel on a really, really loud place. So that can be quite challenging. And the inability of monitoring signals on site. No, I'm not talking about the track. I'm talking at the stadium, somewhere in the stadium. Being able to have another layer of somebody checking the signals. So that's still not quite smooth as it could be. I'm sure there's a reason why, and why it's not as smooth as possible. But I would like to see a move to a more like as an easier chain of communication, and a way for us to also take some ownership about the signals that we are taking care of on site, because you feel a bit blinded sometimes. Like, I hope this is okay, until somebody says it's not.
Yes.
Yes.
When it comes to kind of storytelling through sound, I mean, different sports have very different sonic identities. How differently do you approach something like football, Formula One, tennis, or athletics?
Yeah, I think very differently is the answer. I think in post the key thing to look at across the different sports is what's the pace of the sport. So if we take F1 as an example, you've got high pace, roaring engines, big moments, starting grid, collisions, last minute overtakes, that kind of thing. So when we bring those into post for packages or all the way up to documentaries, we can maybe lean more into sound design, get a bit more fun with the sound design, some what I would call crispy whooshes to sort of complement the...
What's a crispy whoosh?
So like a whoosh.
A whoosh.
Yeah, so instead of sort of a soft windy whoosh, it's got a bit more something to it. That's very much just a me term. But so we can lean more into that, maybe pull back on the music, more into the sound design for the kind of the high energy. If we pivot from that into something like golf, you've got a much slower pace of play. Yes, you still have the big moments, you have the hole-in-ones, or you've got the sort of the misses, but it's a much slower pace of play. So you'd maybe lean back on the sound design and push more into the music. You're also much more intimately surrounded by the crowd. So in post, we've got that separation, we've got a bit more time to play with. We can push that crowd a bit more to make it feel a bit more intimate. Whereas in F1, the crowd, are way off in the stands, so you'd pull a bit back on that. So absolutely, different sports have very different paces, and we would approach each one with care.
Angela, how does it work in a live environment? Does it change quite a bit?
It changed quite a bit. The way I think about it is like different sports are different instruments. You wouldn't choose the same microphone, you wouldn't choose the same technique to mic them up. So for football, as you say, it's about the crowd and how that is going to explode and make you feel that. For tennis, it's about the tension, the silence, and timing. Formula One is about the engines, and it's all about this, and all of this is encompassing the sound design and how much care you take to make sure that you replicate those things and capture the sound that we already know. Because if there's like a difference there's going to be some cognitive dissonance there, and you're going to be like, this doesn't sound right, this doesn't feel right,
and then it's
feel like part of it. Exactly. So it's about making sure that you're picking up the right ways to capture these sports. Yes.
Tom, I was going to ask you, what does post-production audio add that can't realistically be achieved in a live environment? But I feel like your crispy whoosh was an example of that. But are there any others?
That's it. That's the answer. Just crispy whooshes. No, I mean that feeds back into the storytelling element. I think really. I think the simple answer of what can post bring is more time. And less pressure. That's not to say that there's no pressure and we have infinite time, but we certainly have more time than the live broadcast environment to sort of step back and have a look at it as a whole. So when we get stuff from the edit, it might be that last week's game is getting cut into a little package that's going to go out into this week's game. So it's how do we look at certain moments in that game, and how do we bolster that? How do we build up on it? We have to absolutely lean into the broadcast as to what it was and what happened, but how can we embellish that? How can we build on that? So if we take an example of, let's say, a last-minute goal that was missed, it hit the post on the crossbar. It's like, how can we build on that specific moment? Can we shape the crowd in a slightly different way? Can we sort of pull things apart, layer it up, and start to push the crowd to really emphasise that moment? Can we cut right back and build some tension, sound design, and maybe some spot effects to emphasise that crossbar hit. So
you're very much trying to kind of enhance key
100%.
Key moments. So how do you keep that authenticity in post?
Yeah, I think authenticity is probably the most important thing when taking sport into post, because sports fans know their sport and they love their sport. So in the same way that bird watchers know their birds. It's the old classic, that's the wrong type of bird song for that area of the UK, that kind of thing. So we absolutely owe the sports fans an authentic experience, even if we're taking it into post. So the key thing there really is leaning into the broadcast. Is that how can we take clean feeds from the broadcast and start to shape that around using authentic crowds, even within sports. Different teams sound different leagues sound different, so we've got to absolutely stay true to that. F1's a great example. Not every year, but they often change the engines, and all the engines sound different, and I'm not going to get into a debate of which engines sound the best, but
don't tell me that some people can actually recognise.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if you listen back to 2014, the engines scream, whereas in 2026 they're a bit more subdued. So if I'm mixing a package that's going to get played out alongside an F1 broadcast, and I put a load of 2014 engines all over that, it's going to sound completely inauthentic.
So can I ask you something? When you say you've got to, in post, you're leaning into the live broadcast, you're leaning into the sounds that Angela's captured, but you're enhancing them.
Yes.
Are you enhancing them with sounds, say, from that particular game or match, or are you going into an archive of sound effects and using some of those sounds?
Yeah, a little bit of both. So what we try and do is we'll take the feeds from the broadcast and we'll try and build archives of sounds that are new. So, for example, for F1, we'll try and build a library of this year's engines that we can then, if we do need to enhance or place over the top of existing sound, we have the right sounds to do that, and we can do that in an authentic way. I think the other side of it, as well as a mixer, is it's always really tempting to say, oh, if I can remove that thing, maybe I should. So if we take indoor tennis as an example, you get a lot of trainer squeaks in that. So as a mixer, I want to send that into Isotope and just circle it and get rid of those squeaks and have a really nice, clean sound. But that's going to sound inauthentic if that's played alongside a live broadcast of tennis. It's going to sound completely wrong. So I think authenticity is absolutely the most important thing.
Fan noise is a big part of matches.
Yeah.
It's not always very clear if you're not there in the live game. Do you have an archive of different fan cheers that you are layering on?
So we'll lean into what we get from the broadcast absolutely as much as we can. We'll try and get clean feeds from that where we can use those specific crowds, the right crowd underneath that. If it's, for example, a slow-mo shot where there's no sound on there, we need to build that from the ground up. So we'll absolutely just take bits of crowd from elsewhere in that game to make sure it feels absolutely as authentic as possible, and we'll absolutely library that up as well, so we have it there if we need it in future for a similar game or a similar feel.
But it's possible, I'm slightly leading here because I know the answer, but it is actually possible that you use different fan noise. I didn't know this until very recently, that you use different fan noises in football games to layer onto other football games.
Couldn't possibly comment on that. Yes, sometimes. If we need to, we will, but that's where we lean into the director and the producer as well. We want to.
So it's not a case that an Arsenal fan could be listening to an Arsenal match and hearing cheers of Man United fans.
It could be possible.
Okay.
But we would need to do that in an authentic way. So that we would lean into the director, the producer, what was the feel in the stadium, what was the vibe there, and we'll lean into the broadcast as well and pull as much clean feed from that as we can and build in an authentic way.
And so much of this is about getting very good, high quality, clean feeds. Angela, how has technology genuinely improved live sports production?
Well, as I was mentioning earlier, Dante has been around for a very long time, and now I'm starting to see it actually being deployed on the real life. So that's made a huge difference, really, on how much infrastructure we need to deploy and how much more redundancy. Now we have more redundancy because of Dante. So that's changed a lot. On the side of plugins, Cedar is also quite important. We use it to reduce the noise. So that's hugely important. But with any technology, it's very easy to deploy if it works, if people know how to deploy it. So it's made our lives easier, but at the same time, it could go really wrong if people are not properly trained. So I would like to see more of a universal approach to training staffers and freelancers alike, so we can all troubleshoot more effectively and make sure that things are much more resilient, because we're only as strong as the weakest person in our team, really. Okay. And I really, really want to see everybody feeling really confident to deploy these technologies, because they all have its caveats. It'll be working fantastically until it doesn't, and then it's horrible, you know.
And what about AI? How is that entering?
So AI has been used a lot to monitor like a large amount of feeds, mostly around quality control and making sure things are in phase, their delay time is right, or if they're not, it will tell you basically. They use it lots for quality control, and sometimes to create like secondary feeds. It's got a time and a place, really. I think I don't want to say that AI is wrong, because it's not, but it should be there to aid, not to replace the critical and the creative input from a sound person that has had lots of years of experience. AI AI should be there to enhance, really. We need to make sure that this is not going to shut down the pipeline for new talent and for people to get proper experience, because that might happen if we overuse it or if we replace too many things.
Tom, what about you? How is AI being kind of used in post-production? And is it actually helping, or is it just adding more complexity?
Yeah, I think personally as a mixer, I've seen the main kind of avenue I've seen for AI in audio is noise reducers. So dialogue feeds back into that dialogue intelligibility point, really. And I think it's kind of manifests itself as the latest and greatest denoiser. So I think if we look at that and that's used in sport, I think there's absolutely a place to use dialogue denoisers in sport. Certainly in post, if it's a noisy post-match interview or in the stadium where there's music blasting. But again, it has to be used with balance. It feeds back into the authenticity point, where if we just because we can clean something up perfectly doesn't mean we should necessarily. So I think overly clean stuff, me personally, I'm always cautious to not over clean, because I think that's where it starts to sound slightly unauthentic. Where it has been really helpful in terms of denoising is for if we're doing a documentary, we've got a lot of old footage where we necessarily don't have the splits of that game, and we don't have the clean comms, and it's covered in crowd. It's really helpful to be able to salvage certain lines. Sometimes directors will come to us and say, can we even use this line in this promo? It's really, really noisy. Is there anything you can do to salvage it? So it can be really helpful to salvage certain lines, but I think I'm always cautious personally to not overuse it, and I would much rather a really clean, technically great multi-track split from the broadcast that I can start to push around in a really authentic way.
Well, as you were saying, Angela, the temptation is to put it everywhere.
Exactly.
Where is human input still irreplaceable when it comes to sport and sound?
Anything nuanced, anything that's culturally relevant, something that you need to make decisions based on a cultural reference. You can't replace that with AI, and we shouldn't try either. That's the beauty of us. We make decisions according to different factors, different variables, whatever is pertinent to this country or another country. It should not be replaced, and also we just need to make sure that we're not going too far with it. Like, we implement certain things very slowly in broadcast. I think we should take the same approach, Don't get carried away by FOMO. Not because this person might do it first. Let's take time. Let's make sure that we have the signal path is reliable and resilient end to end. Let's make sure we are operating to the highest standards that we can, because we have so much trajectory, and then we can start implementing. There's a time and a place for repetitive things. You shouldn't try to replace humans with this.
Just briefly, because I do want to leave time for questions. Looking ahead, what do you think audiences might expect from sports audio in 2030 that feels hugely ambitious and out of touch today?
I think from a post standpoint, I think it feeds back into that point of just more. I think more content across a wider range of sport. But I think Angela touched on a point early on as well about a more personalised experience as well. Is there, certainly for a broadcast, is there something in post? Is there a way that we can mix in a more personalised way, maybe across a couple of different viewpoints for a game, for example, implementing maybe up into Dolby Atmos and object-based audio. So I think those two things I'm really excited about.
I also think the personalized audio experience is going to be bigger. I don't know to what extent. I think there might be, at some point, a little bit of fatigue, perhaps. I see it two ways. Either we go really personalized or we go back to what we used to do.
Yeah.
There's also certainly a move to, de-Google yourself, make things a little bit more analog. Maybe people want to go back to that. Maybe people want really, and we're going to separate. But the real challenge with personalized audio is, do you have the equipment to replicate what we're trying to what we're mixing in the studio or in the OB track. Because yes, you could have all of these experiences and stuff, but if you don't have the speakers to replicate it or the setup, it's going to fall short. So all of this work that we're putting, you're not going to be able to experience properly. And I think that's the challenge, people investing in that.
So I just want to leave time for Q&A. Yes. So a couple of questions have come in. I don't know does anyone have a question in person? We can send a mic to you. But someone's asked, what's your favourite project this year so far to both of you? Tom, why don't you go first?
Favourite sport project? Ooh, that's a really good question. I did a couple of weeks ago. It was only a small package, and it was about 2 or 3 minutes long. But it was a sort of recap highlight on the Merseyside derby, and essentially the director came to me and said, I've put no voice in this. There's no talking. It's all just effects and music. Can we have some fun with that? So it was essentially just crowd and spot effects. So for me, that's really exciting because it means I can just go really fun with the sound design, get those crispy whooshes in there, and really have fun with the music. But also, it really showed, because it was over quite a few years of the Merseyside derby, and it just shows how the crowd kind of changes throughout all of those years. So I absolutely loved that. It was only a short thing, but it was really, really fun.
Angela, favourite sports project this year?
I'm looking forward to Wimbledon. This will be my second year mixing Wimbledon, and so last year was my first year, and I certainly learned a lot of how Wimbledon works, and I have a real idea of what things I want to do better and how I want to approach things differently, because it's such a bucket list. Like, I love this. Thank you, universe, whatever. Like, I really wanted to do this, and I want to make sure I'm doing the best from my capacity and for the team every year that I'm on, if I'm lucky to be there next year as well. So I'm really looking forward to that, not only because of the technical aspect, but also because of the team that I'm working with. It's fantastic. So yeah.
So another question, this one to you, Tom. Which sport do you think a Wilhelm screen would enhance? Wilhelm screen.
That's a good question. I don't know. Boxing, maybe. Squeeze that in somewhere.
And someone's actually asked on that point, can you tell us about a sports project you've mixed where you've consciously used additional non-sport audio sources?
Oh, that's a good question as well. Again, in that Merseyside derby feature that I did, there was a couple of shots in the middle of some pretty nasty tackles, and we wanted to enhance this feeling of rivalry, this feeling of not aggression, but this feeling of real clashing of these two teams. So there was a real opportunity to get some sort of what we'd call body falls, which is kind of almost Foley sound, to make those clatterings and where these players were crashing into each other, to really kind of beef that up and give it a sort of a much more intense feeling for that moment, because we wanted to enhance the rivalry. So I guess that, yeah.
Thank you. I think we're pretty much run out of time, actually. But I just want to say thank you very much to Angela and Tom for that discussion, and thank you for all your questions as well.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.